When the Galactic Council compared human DNA to the fiercest warrior species in the sector. They expected humans to rank low, maybe even embarrassingly low. But the scanners froze, warning lights triggered, and the lab said, I demanded a second verification because humans didn't just match the warrior race. They carried 3 times the combat markers, the aggression sequences, and the survival traits. In that moment, every alien scientist understood one thing. Humans weren't just another species. They were something the galaxy had never prepared for. The discovery, the unexpected invitation. Sarah Chen never imagined she would stand inside the Galactic Genetic Institute, a floating research station that orbited a neutron star in the Vidara system. The structure itself was a marvel of alien engineering, with transparent corridors that offered breathtaking views of cosmic phenomena. Sarah pressed her hand against the cool surface of the observation window, watching radiation storms dance across neutron star's surface in brilliant shades of purple and gold. She was the only human among 300 alien researchers who had gathered for the annual Genetic Comparison Summit. For 15 years, species from across known space had come together to share their biological data, seeking patterns and insights that might benefit all civilizations. Sarah had been invited as a courtesy, a token representative from one of the galaxy's newest members. Nobody expected humanity to contribute anything significant to the discussions. The main conference chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. Sarah watched as the Matherian delegates floated in their liquid-filled spheres, while the massive Thornback scientists lumbered to their reinforced seating areas. The air hummed with translation devices, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible speech. The crater presentation, the morning session, belonged to the crater, and everyone knew it. For 8,000 years, the crater had been recognized as the galaxy's premier warrior race. They had evolved on a brutal, high-gravity world where every creature was a predator, and survival meant constant vigilance. Their society had been built on strength, honor, and martial prowess. Even now, in an era of relative galactic peace, the crater maintained their warrior traditions with fierce pride. General Vexter stood at the presentation platform, his scaled body gleaming under the lights. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and natural armor plating that could deflect most small arms fire. His reptilian face bore the scars of countless battles, each mark a badge of honor in crater culture. Esteemed colleagues, Vexter began, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. Today, we present the culmination of 5 years of genetic research. We have identified and isolated the specific genetic sequences that make the crater what we are, warriors without equal. The holographic display activated, showing a complex double helix structure. Sections of the genetic code glowed in red, highlighting specific marker sequences. Sarah leaned forward, genuinely interested despite her outsider status. These are what we call aggression sequences, Vexler continued. They govern our response to threats, our capacity for sustained combat, our ability to make tactical decisions under extreme stress, and our drive to protect our pack. Through careful analysis, we have quantified these markers. The crater genome contains 2.4 relative units of aggression sequencing. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the audience. The Matherians pulsed with bioluminescent approval. The Thornbacks nodded their massive heads in respect. Vexter gestured to the comparison chart. For context, the peaceful Valorians measure at 0.3 units. The Thornbacks, despite their size and strength, measure at 0.8 units. Even the Zenth Collective, known for their defensive capabilities, measure only 1.2 units. The craters stand alone at the apex of martial genetic potential. The human sample Sarah felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Dr. Kellyan, a 4-armed Valorian scientist who had befriended her during the journey to the station, leaned close. Sarah, the committee wishes to include human data in the comparison, Kellyan whispered. It's standard procedure for all attending species. Nothing to worry about, just a formality. Sarah nodded and followed Kelly into a small laboratory adjacent to the main chamber. The process was simple, a quick tissue sample that could be analyzed, immediately using the Institute's advanced genetic sequencers. Within minutes, her sample was being processed alongside data from dozens of other species. This will take about an hour, the technician explained, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like bells. You may return to the conference. We'll notify you when the analysis is complete. Sarah returned to her seat, thinking nothing more of it. She listened as other species presented their findings, the Corvani discussing their enhanced sensory genetics, the Dulmer explaining their remarkable regenerative capabilities. Each presentation was fascinating in its own way, a window into the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy. The results. The afternoon session was interrupted by an unusual occurrence. The head of the Genetic Institute, Chancellor Morvith, called for an immediate recess. Whispers spread through the chamber as scientists exchanged confused glances. Such interruptions were unprecedented at the summit. Sarah's communicator buzzed. A message from Dr. Kellyan. Please come to Laboratory 7 immediately. There's been an issue with your genetic analysis. Her stomach tightened with worry as she made her way through the winding corridors. Had something gone wrong with the equipment? Was there something abnormal about her biology that might indicate a health problem? She found Laboratory 7 crowded with scientists. Dr. Kellyan stood near the central display, his forearms gesticulating rapidly as he argued with a group of skeptical-looking researchers. When he spotted Sarah, relief flooded his face. Thank the stars you're here, Kellyan said. We need to run the analysis again. The results we're getting can't possibly be correct. What's wrong? Sarah asked, genuinely concerned now. The Thornback scientist, Dr. Grimmer, turned to face her. The sequencer must be malfunctioning. It's showing impossibly high readings for your aggression markers. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because Kellyan quickly explained. The machine is indicating that humans possess 7.2 relative units of aggression sequencing. That's 3 times higher than the crater. It's clearly an error. The room fell silent. Sarah looked at the display, seeing her own genetic code floating in the holographic space. Sections of it glowing in intense red that seemed to dominate the entire structure. Run it again, she said quietly. The verification. They ran the analysis 5 more times, using 3 different machines. Each time, the results were the same. They tested Sarah's sample against stored human genetic data from Earth's databases. The patterns matched perfectly. There was no error, no malfunction. Chancellor Morvith arrived, accompanied by General Vexter and the summit's lead geneticists. The laboratory had become crowded with curious observers, all wanting to see the impossible data for themselves. This cannot be accurate, Vexter said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Humans are not warriors. You have been part of the galactic community for only 2 decades. You have no martial tradition, no warrior culture. Your species is known for diplomacy and trade, not combat. Sarah found herself at the center of attention, dozens of alien eyes studying her as if seeing her for the first time. She was suddenly very aware of her small stature, her soft skin, her complete lack of natural armor or weapons. She looked nothing like a warrior. Perhaps, Dr. Kellyan suggested carefully, the markers measure something different in humans. The same genetic sequences might produce different results in different species. But the chief geneticist, elderly Corvani named Dr. Shells, shook his head. The aggression sequences are universal. They appear in similar forms across hundreds of species. The function is identical. They govern threat response, combat persistence, protective instincts, and tactical adaptation. If the human genome contains these markers at such high concentrations, then humans possess these capabilities. Whether they choose to use them or not, the controversy erupts. News of the discovery spread through the summit like wildfire. Within an hour, the main conference chamber was filled to capacity, with additional attendees joining via holographic link from across the galaxy. Sarah found herself on the presentation platform, standing next to her own genetic data, while hundreds of scientists demanded explanations. There must be an environmental factor, one researcher suggested. Perhaps Earth's conditions required heightened aggression for survival. Or it could be a recent mutation, another added. A genetic anomaly that hasn't been eliminated by natural selection yet. Sarah listened to them theorize and speculate, treating her species like a fascinating puzzle to be solved. Finally, she raised her hand, asking for permission to speak. Chancellor Morvith nodded. Dr. Chen, perhaps you can provide some insight into human evolutionary history that might explain these findings. Sarah took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. She had studied xenobiology, had learned about dozens of alien species and their evolutionary paths. Now she had to explain her own species to an audience that thought they understood what it meant to be a warrior race. You're right that humans don't have a warrior culture like the Crater, Sarah began. But you're wrong about what that means, General Vexler. Your people evolved to be warriors because your world was dangerous. Every day was a battle for survival against powerful predators in harsh conditions. You developed strength, armor, and combat instincts because you needed them to survive. Vexler nodded slowly. This is correct. Earth was equally dangerous, Sarah continued, but in a different way. We didn't have natural armor or weapons. We weren't the strongest or fastest creatures on our planet. We were prey animals who somehow became predators. Do you know how we accomplished that? The chamber was silent, waiting. We refused to give up, Sarah said simply. No matter how many times we were hunted, no matter how many dangers we faced, we just kept going. We learned to make weapons from stones and sticks. We learned to hunt animals much larger and stronger than ourselves. We learned to work together, to plan, to persist. She gestured to the genetic display. These markers don't just measure capacity for violence. They measure the refusal to quit when quitting would be reasonable. They measure the ability to keep fighting when fighting seems hopeless. They measure the drive to protect what matters, regardless of the cost. Humans don't have claws or armor or venom. What we have is stubbornness. We have the ability to look at impossible odds and decide to try anyway. The weight of discovery. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some scientists were nodding, beginning to understand. Others remained skeptical, unable to reconcile the peaceful humans they knew with the genetic warriors revealed by the data. General Vexler stepped forward, his forearms crossed in a gesture of contemplation. If what you say is true, then why do humans not dominate the galaxy? With such genetic advantages, you should be conquerors, not diplomats. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Because genetic potential isn't destiny, General. Yes, we evolved to survive through conflict. Yes, we have the capacity for sustained combat and relentless persistence. But we also evolved intelligence and empathy. We learned that cooperation achieves more than conflict. We chose to build civilizations instead of war bands. We chose to explore the stars in peace rather than conquest. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Crater became warriors because their world made them warriors. Humans became warriors because survival demanded it. But then we became something more. We became builders, artists, scientists, dreamers. We kept the capacity for combat, but we chose to use our persistence and determination for other purposes. The silence that followed was profound. Scientists who had spent their careers studying genetic determinism were confronted with a species that embodied both nature and choice, potential and restraint. Chancellor Morvith finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. This discovery changes much about how we understand humanity. It also raises important questions about what these genetic markers truly mean, and how species choose to express their evolutionary heritage. As the session adjourned for the day, Sarah remained at the platform, staring at her genetic code displayed in glowing holographic light. For the first time, she saw her species not as newcomers to a galaxy of powerful civilizations, but as something unique warriors who had chosen a different path, carrying the capacity for relentless determination while dedicating that same persistence to peace. Discovery and understanding. Tomorrow would bring more discussions. More questions and more challenges to explain what it meant to be human. But tonight, Sarah allowed herself to feel a strange pride in her ancestors who had survived impossible odds, through sheer stubborn refusal to quit, and in her contemporaries, who had channeled that same determination into reaching for the stars, the truth, behind the numbers the morning after Sarah barely slept that night. Her quarters on the research station were comfortable enough, with a viewing port that displayed the neutron star's endless cosmic dance. But her mind refused to rest. She kept replaying the shocked faces of the alien scientists, the disbelief in General Vexler S., the weight of representing her entire species in a moment that would reshape galactic understanding of humanity. Her communicator chimed at dawn, or what passed for dawn. On a space station that never saw sun, Dr. Kellyan's message was brief. Emergency council meeting. Your presence requested. This is bigger than we thought. When Sarah entered the council chamber, she found it transformed from the day before. Instead of the casual academic atmosphere of a scientific summit, the room now held an air of serious deliberation. Representatives from major galactic powers had arrived overnight, their holographic presences filling additional spaces around the chamber. This was no longer just about genetics. This was about politics, security, and the future of human-alien relations. Chancellor Morvith stood at the center podium, his aged face grave. Dr. Chen, thank you for joining us. Overnight, our discovery has spread throughout the civilized galaxy. We have received communications from 73 planetary governments, 80 military alliances, and countless research institutions. Everyone wants to understand what your species truly is. Sarah took her designated seat, feeling very small and very alone. I can only tell you what I know about human history and evolution. I'm a scientist, not a politician. That is precisely why we value your perspective, Morvith replied. Politicians will draw their own conclusions. We need truth, not speculation. The evolutionary journey, a holographic display materialized above the chamber, showing Earth as it had existed millions of years ago. Sarah recognized the continents from her studies, though they were arranged differently than the modern world she knew. Dr. Chen, began Dr. Shells, the Corvani geneticist. We have reviewed Earth's evolutionary records. We need you to help us understand something that seems contradictory. Your species evolved from prey animals, creatures hunted by larger predators. Yet your genetic markers suggest an apex predator mentality. How did this transformation occur? Sarah stood and approached the display, manipulating it to show the African savanna 2 million years ago. It started here, she began. Our ancestors were small, weak, and vulnerable. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They were food for lions, leopards, hyenas, and countless other predators. The display showed primitive hominids fleeing from a pursuing predator. Several alien scientists leaned forward with interest. But our ancestors had something unusual, Sarah continued. They could sweat. That sounds trivial, but it was revolutionary. Most mammals cool themselves by panting, which means they have to stop running to breathe. Humans could run for hours in the heat of the African sun without stopping. We became persistence hunters. She changed the display to show an early human following an antelope. We would select a target and simply follow it, not chasing at full speed, just jogging along behind it, hour after hour. The prey would run away, rest, and we would appear again. It would run again, rest again, and we would still be there. Eventually, after hours or even days, the prey would collapse from exhaustion and heat stroke. Then we would walk up and kill it with simple stone tools. A Thornback scientist made a rumbling sound of discomfort. That is unsettling. You describe a predation method based not on strength or speed, but on psychological warfare and endless patience. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. We became the monster that never stops coming. The predator that cannot be escaped through speed or strength, only through outlasting our determination. And nothing could outlast our determination. The dark history General Vexter spoke up, his voice carrying across the chamber. This explains your hunting methods, but not the extreme concentration of combat markers. Hunting prey is different from fighting warriors. Sarah's expression grew somber. You're right, General. And that brings us to the darkest part of human history, the part that explains why our aggression markers are so pronounced. She manipulated the display to show human civilizations spreading across Earth. About 10,000 years ago, humans developed agriculture. We stopped being nomadic hunters and became settlers. We built permanent homes, grew crops, raised livestock. Our population exploded. And then we faced a new problem, other humans who wanted what we had. The display showed armies clashing, civilizations rising and falling, wars spreading across continents. For 10,000 years, General, humans fought humans. Constantly. Endlessly. We developed weapons specifically designed to kill other humans. We created military strategies, tactical formations, siege warfare, naval combat, aerial bombardment. Every innovation in human technology was immediately weaponized and tested against other humans. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Kellyan spoke quietly. You evolved to be persistent hunters, and then spent 10,000 years in continuous warfare against opponents who were exactly as persistent as you were. Yes, Sarah confirmed. Imagine two species with the creator's warrior genetics fighting each other for 10 millennia. Every advantage one group developed, the other group had to match or counter. It was an evolutionary arms race where both sides were the same species. We became exceptionally good at combat because we were fighting enemies who were just as determined, just as stubborn, just as unwilling to quit as we were. The protective instinct DR. Shells manipulated her own display, bringing up the specific genetic sequences that had caused such controversy. Dr. Chen, there is another aspect to these markers that we have not yet discussed publicly. May I? Sarah nodded, though she felt a knot forming in her stomach. She had seen the full analysis and knew what was coming. The aggression sequences in the human genome are not uniformly distributed, Dr. Shells explained to the assembly. They cluster most densely around genes associated with offspring protection and pack bonding. In simple terms, humans are most dangerous when defending those they love. A new display appeared, showing comparative data. The protective instinct markers in humans measure at 8.6 relative units. To put this in perspective, the Mothern Collective, a species whose entire biology revolves around protecting their hive queen, measures at 2.1 units. Humans have more than quadruple the protective instincts of the galaxy's most famously protective species. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. A representative from the Pelian Consortium, appearing via hologram, spoke up. This suggests that threatening a human's family would trigger a response beyond anything we have encountered in known space. Is this accurate? Sarah felt all eyes turned to her. She chose her words carefully. Human history is full of stories about individuals fighting impossible odds to protect their children or loved ones. Parents lifting vehicles off trapped children despite lacking the strength to do so. Soldiers holding defensive positions against overwhelming forces to give their families time to escape. Entire communities organizing to protect a single endangered child. We call these stories heroic, but really they're just humans being humans. This is terrifying, the Pelian representative said bluntly. You are describing a species that becomes exponentially more dangerous when their emotional bonds are threatened. How can the galaxy feel safe with such a species among us? The Crater's request before Sarah could respond. General Vexter stood, his forearms spread in a gesture of formal address. I request permission to speak directly to Dr. Chen. Chancellor Morvith nodded. Granted. Vexter approached Sarah, his massive form towering over her small frame. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his scaled hide, each one a story of combat survived. His eyes, however, held not aggression, but something closer to respect. Dr. Chen, I must ask you something that has troubled me since yesterday's revelation. The Crater have been warriors for 8,000 years. Our society is built upon martial honor, combat prowess, and strength. We take pride in our warrior heritage. Yet the data suggests humans possess far greater genetic capacity for warfare than my people. How do you reconcile this with humanity's choice to pursue peace? Sarah met his gaze steadily. General, may I ask you a question first? Why do the Creator value warrior culture? Vexter seemed surprised by the question, but answered readily. Because strength protects what is valuable. Because discipline creates order. Because the warrior's code provides meaning and purpose. Because without the capacity to defend ourselves, we would be at the mercy of those who would do us harm. Exactly, Sarah said. The Creator are warriors because it gives your society structure, meaning, and security. But what if I told you that humans discovered something that provides all those things without requiring constant readiness for war? I would be skeptical, Vexter admitted. What could provide meaning and purpose as effectively as the warrior's path? Creation, Sarah said simply. Building things, discovering things, making things that never existed before. Humans are builders, General. We build cities, societies, technologies, art, music, stories, and relationships. We build futures for our children. We find meaning not in what we can destroy, but in what we can create. She gestured to the Earth display. Yes, we spent 10,000 years at war. But do you know what else we did during that time? We built the pyramids, the Great Wall, the Taj Mahal. We wrote poetry and philosophy. We composed symphonies. We painted masterpieces. We discovered mathematics, physics, and medicine. Even during our worst wars, we were simultaneously creating beautiful, meaningful things. The philosophy of choice there. Kelly enjoying the conversation, his forearms moving in gestures of emphasis. I believe I understand what Dr. Chan is explaining. The Creator became warriors because their environment demanded it, and then built their culture around that necessity. Humans became warriors for the same reason, but then chose to build their culture around something else entirely. Precisely, Sarah agreed. We have the genetic capacity for sustained warfare. We have the protective instincts that make us dangerous when threatened. But we also have the intelligence to recognize that living in constant conflict is exhausting and ultimately self-defeating. About 300 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. We came very close to extinction, and at that moment, we had a choice: continue the path of warfare until nothing remained, or find a different way to exist. She pulled up historical data showing Earth's transformation over the past 3 centuries. We chose differently. We created international organizations to resolve conflicts peacefully. We redirected our competitive instincts into sports, business, and scientific rivalry. We built space programs that turned our desire to explore and conquer into a quest to understand the universe. We took all that stubborn persistence that made us dangerous and channeled it into becoming better. General Vexter studied the data silently for a long moment. You are saying that humans are dangerous not despite choosing peace, but because you choose peace. That the choice itself demonstrates the strength of will that the genetic markers measure. Yes, Sarah confirmed. It's easy to be peaceful when you have no capacity for violence. The Valorians are gentle because they lack the genetic makeup for sustained aggression. No offense to them, it's simply their nature. But humans have to actively choose peace every single day, despite our nature pushing us toward conflict. That choice requires constant effort, constant discipline, and constant commitment. The fact that we maintain it anyway proves we have the strength those genetic markers measure. The reassessment Chancellor Mordrith spoke, his voice thoughtful. This council was convened because many feared that humanity posed a hidden threat to galactic stability. We have learned that humans possess unprecedented genetic capacity for warfare and protection of their own. But we have also learned that humanity has channeled these capacities into constructive rather than destructive purposes. He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. The question before us is not whether humans are dangerous, clearly. They have the capacity for danger. The question is whether that capacity makes them a threat or an asset to the galactic community. The Pelian representative spoke again. I withdraw my earlier concern. A species that must actively choose peace every day is more trustworthy than a species that is simply incapable of war. The first has proven their commitment. The second has simply never been tested. Other representatives began voicing agreement. The Thornback delegate rumbled. Besides, humans have been part of our community for 20 years now. In that time, they have participated in 3 major diplomatic negotiations and achieved peaceful resolutions in all 3. Their track record speaks louder than their genetics. The understanding as the formal session drew to a close, General Vexter requested a private conversation with Sarah. They walked together through the observation corridors, watching the neutron star storms rage in silent beauty beyond the transparent walls. I owe you an apology, Dr. Chen, Vexter said quietly. When I first met you, I saw a small, soft creature with no natural weapons or armor. I made assumptions based on appearances. Sarah smiled slightly. Most people do. We're not physically impressive compared to most spacefaring species. But you are impressive in ways I failed to recognize, Vexter continued. The Crater pride themselves on strength and martial discipline. We train from childhood to be warriors. We build our entire society around combat readiness. And yet, you humans possess greater genetic capacity for warfare than we do, and you barely train for combat at all. Instead, you train to be scientists, artists, builders, and dreamers. You have the strength to be warriors, but the wisdom to choose differently. He stopped walking and turned to face her directly. That is not weakness, Dr. Chun. That is the highest form of strength, the strength to restrain your own power in service of a greater good. Sarah felt unexpected emotion welling up. Thank you, General. That means more than you know. Humanity has always worried that we were too aggressive, too stubborn, too inclined toward conflict. Learning that these traits are encoded in our very DNA was troubling, but perhaps it's not about what we are. Perhaps it's about what we choose to do with what we are. Indeed, Vexter agreed. The Crater have much to learn from humanity. We have built our culture on the foundation of what we must be to survive. Perhaps it is time we considered what we could choose to become. The New Perspective the Genetic Comparison Summit concluded 2 days later with a historic joint statement. The discovery of humanity's unprecedented aggression markers had not created fear or suspicion. Instead, it had sparked a galaxy-wide philosophical discussion about nature, choice, and the relationship between genetic potential and cultural values. Dozens of species began reevaluating their own genetic profiles, not just looking at what their DNA said they were capable of, but asking what they chose to do with those capabilities. The Crater initiated a cultural exchange program with humanity, sending warriors to study human arts, sciences, and philosophy. Other species requested similar exchanges. Curious about how humans balance their aggressive nature with their peaceful society, Sarah remained at the Institute for another month. Collaborating with researchers from across the galaxy, the data on human genetics was no longer threatening. It was fascinating. Scientists wanted to understand how a species with such extreme combat capability had developed strong prohibitions against violence. Philosophers debated whether human ethics were more meaningful because they ran counter to human nature. Sociologists studied how human societies channeled competitive instincts into constructive outcomes. On her last night at the station, Sarah stood at her favorite observation window, watching the neutron star's eternal light show. Dr. Killian found her there, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and farewell gifts. You have changed the galaxy's understanding of many things, my friend, Killian said warmly. Not just humanity, but the relationship between biology and choice for all species. Sarah smiled. I just told the truth about where we came from and who we chose to become. The galaxy drew its own conclusions. And what have you concluded? Killian asked. How do you feel, knowing that your species carries such capacity for violence? Sarah considered the question carefully, watching the cosmic storms rage beyond the safety of the station's walls. I think I'm proud, she finally said. Not proud of the violence itself, but proud that we overcame it. We evolved to be survivors, to never give up, to protect what we love with everything we have. Those are good traits. The violence was just one application of them. We found better applications. She turned to face her friend. Every human carries the genetic legacy of 10,000 years of warfare. But every human also inherits the choice our ancestors made to build instead of destroy, to create instead of conquer, to reach for the stars in peace rather than rage. That's the truth behind the numbers, Kellyanne. We are what we were, but we're also what we choose to be. And we choose to be more. As Sarah's shuttle departed the station the next morning, carrying her back toward human space, she carried with her a new understanding of her species. Humanity had not left its aggressive past behind. It carried that past in every cell of everybody. But humans had proven that genetic potential was not destiny. They were warriors who chose peace, predators who chose compassion, survivors who chose to help others survive. The galaxy now understood that about humanity. More importantly, humanity now understood it about themselves. And understanding, Sarah reflected, might be the most important discovery of all.